the generic vision for chain abstraction that is developing across Ethereum and maybe just across crypto broadly starts with something that is like, I don't know what chain this app is on. I don't know where my assets are. Like everything that I want to do just works. Oftentimes people point to the like, I don't know which cloud provider this server's in. I just show up on a website and everything sort of works, right? We want to help enable those sorts of experiences.
Hello, and welcome to the third Optimism Quarterly Webinar with Token Relations. I am Jacquelyn Melnick, the co-founder of Token Relations, and joining me today for a fireside discussion is Sam McIngvale, the head of product at OP Labs. Sam, how are you?
Hey, Jacquelyn, I'm great. Excited to be here and chat about what we're up to over at OP Labs.
100%. I'm sure there is a lot going on over there. But I guess to start off, before we get into everything, for those who may be new, the Optimism Superchain ecosystem is a network of L2s built on the OP stack. And today we're going to be exploring how Optimism is evolving its product roadmap, including native interop, Superchain ERC20, Ethereum's upcoming Pectra upgrade. I think I said that correct, including blob increases and 7702. Block times, and more. If you don't understand what we're talking about, Sam and I will break it down. We'll also be opening up for Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. Sam, starting off with the Optimism 2025 roadmap, given your role at OP Labs, what are some of the major product upgrades that you're looking to deliver this year?
Yeah, excited to jump into this. First, let me just frame how we think about our product at a really high level, and then we'll dive into some of the specifics that we're super excited about for 2025. Optimism's product is the Superchain. You already talked a little bit about this, Jacquelyn. And that might be a little confusing because the thing that we write code in, kind of the way that we talk to people that are our customers, the thing we sell to them is the OP stack. Or the thing that we sort of facilitate for them is the open source OP stack, which helps folks run L2s. But really, we think of our product as the Superchain. And the reason for that is because that is where all the value that sort of goes to Ethereum via helping to scale Ethereum, all the value that comes back to Optimism, all the value that goes to our chain operators, really like comes to its fullest or something like that. Like that's where it's all of that value is realized to the maximum extent. So all of our product framings have to do with the Superchain, even though where we actually write code is the OP stack. So with that sort of disclaimer out there, there's four things that we're trying to do for the Superchain in 2025. The first is we have to make it the Superchain. Today, these L2s are not interconnected. We have to shift interop. This is our highest priority. If we do anything in 2025, it's going to be shift interop and hopefully make it as impactful and as wonderful for Ethereum as we hope it can be. Once we have made the Superchain, there's three ways we think about what we want to do there. One, we want to make it the best place for DeFi. We want to make it the best place for builders. And we want to be the most Ethereum aligned of the L2 ecosystems on top of Ethereum. So with those three frames, a bunch of stuff that we're doing under the hood. The main thing is interop. I know we're going to talk a lot about that. We're also super excited about always driving down transaction costs and improving transaction speed. We think of this predominantly in block times, but we want the Superchain to be the best place for consumers, for anyone to get a transaction done in all of crypto. And so we think of that in terms of always driving down costs and always making transactions as fast as they can be. Those would be our two sort of like big frames on priorities this year, of which a lot of things fall out under the hood, like blobs, Pectra, all sorts of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in regards to those two main things, how is that changing from maybe 2024 into 2025? Obviously, it's going to be an upgrade to those parts, but when you look back at the previous year, what do you think was done really well in regards to scaling the Superchain? And then what do you think is going to really bring it to like the next level next year? I guess it would be those two parts, but I'm trying to see like the transgression between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the big sort of unlock, or there were two big features that really came to the Superchain in 2024. The first was not unique to the Superchain, although Optimism and Base in particular had a big role in bringing 4844, aka blobs, to both L1 and L2s. So this has enabled so much more scale, at least 2 orders of magnitude cheaper transactions on L2s. That happened March of 2024. The other one is permissionless vault proofs, OP mainnet moving to stage 1. This will carry forward into 2025. We'll start to see lots of OP stack L2s. The chains in the Superchain become stage 1. Base has already deployed permissionless vault proofs. There are a couple chains that will follow soon. We expect a lot of those to probably upgrade to be stage 1 in Q1, and we're really excited to help kind of pushing in that direction. What most folks didn't see in 2024 was that underneath sort of those big features, we were hard at work at Interop and have been hard at work at Interop for a long time. The Optimism and Superchain vision has always included that. Again, Superchain is an interconnected network of chains. It's not the case today. And so Interop will be the first really big thing that happens in terms of like flagship feature ships from Optimism this year. On the side, I think we're getting much better at sort of understanding how good the UX for both app developers and consumers is on the Superchain, figuring out what the right benchmarks, targets, sort of North Stars are for us there, and pushing in that direction. So scaling blobs is one way to keep transactions cheap. Block times, flash blocks, we might talk about a little bit. Another way to just increase transaction speed or sort of latency from a consumer's perspective.
In regards to interop, could you explain what the native OP stack interoperability means and how it works in regards to where we are today and where we're going to go?
Yeah, so the main thing we mean when we say native OP stack interop is we mean that the code to enable interop, aka like message passing or like I want to do something on this chain and on that chain, natively lives in the OP stack. To maybe make this more real, like let's use another example. What is non-native interop? Non-native interop would be a bridge like across layer 0 wormhole. The code and systems for those bridges have to exist outside of the blockchains they're connecting because they're just totally separate things. We're in this really fortunate position, and all the L2 stacks are, where if we're trying to connect two Superchain L2s, that is OP stack code running on both sides. And so we can go much sort of like further down in the stack and actually do the code to connect those via message passing there. So it's like natively in the stack, so to speak, versus a third-party thing that is working in its own ways to connect to disparate blockchains. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And then in regards to bridging solutions, then would there no longer be a need within the Superchain?
No, we think bridging solutions are like one of the first ways we think native interop will manifest to users. So there's a couple reasons I don't think bridging will ever go away. One, it's kind of ingrained, at least in the near term, in most user behavior. So if I'm on base and I want to go to OP mainnet, I have my favorite bridge that I go to. And I don't expect people are just going to like change their behavior on day one. I also don't expect that like wallets or other apps are going to readily adopt native interop on day one either. It's going to take some time. And so folks will still go to bridges. What's really cool though is we're already chatting with all the bridges I just mentioned and many more, and all of them get to sort of adopt and get supercharged, so to speak, within the Superchain by leveraging native interop. So what that means is if I typically use across or layer 0, and I happen to be going between two Superchain L2s, that bridging experience is suddenly going to be basically free and one block. It's going to effectively feel instant. If I'm using across, or I guess a better example in this case would be if I'm using layer 0 wormhole to go to Solana, while that interface is still going to be the exact same for me, I'm now going to pay a much higher cost because that bridge is not going to take advantage of native interop anymore to move my assets over there. So bridges definitely are not going to go away right away. They will get much, much better within the Superchain. Over time, it's our hope that applications, both wallets, DeFi apps, et cetera, start to adopt native interop either via bridges specifically or directly by leveraging SDKs that we'll put out. And so hopefully when we talk about chain abstraction, folks won't have to think about what chain they're on or where their assets are. They'll just do whatever they need to do. And then we and other folks will provide the tooling for those apps to make all that happen in a quick and easy way.
Yeah, that's huge. I would love to be able to just transact without having to worry about if I did it on the right chain and if I'm moving to the right one and, the whole deal. I guess sure. With that said, how else will the Superchain continue to address issues of fragmentation, like what I just brought up, across users and liquidity, especially with so many different L2s launching and already in circulation?
Yeah, I think we can just kind of extend the example that we were just using with bridges. The main way that we want to think about decreasing fragmentation is by shipping our version of interop, so to speak, using shared standards across Ethereum. We don't want across and layer 0 to have to integrate with our specific flavor of interop and then go do something different within maybe Arbitrum or ZK Sync is maybe a good example here, or certainly like the ag layer. Ideally, we're trying to solidify a few interfaces, a few shared standards that can work across all these. So we'll talk about maybe Superchain ERC20s, which really are, kind of getting rebranded as 7802. That's one example of how we're trying to work via interfaces that can work across all of Ethereum. and not just be specific to the superchain. I think the experience for application developers, maybe more so for users, will still be like we were just talking about, which is when you're within the superchain, that interface might result in a great experience that is slightly different when you leave it. And that'll be sort of a future problem for us all to address in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Of course, there's always future problems, even when things are going well. But in regards to, you kind of touched on this already, but I want to ask you more specifically, like when it comes to native interop on Superchain, how will that help developers in Web3? And are there any specific types of projects or examples that you could see like actually specifically benefiting from this?
I mean, I think it's hard to actually pick like what types of applications will not benefit from it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, today, every app has to sort of deal with, a bunch of people call this different things, but like the noisy neighbor problem. So basically, if some other application starts using a ton of gas, your users are now paying that cost to use your app on that same chain. The point of interop originally in the Superchain vision is to scale Ethereum via horizontal scalability. So like we can stamp out a bunch of blockchains, just like we stamp out a bunch of processors for computers. And then you have to connect them so they can all talk to each other. And it feels like one larger system versus a bunch of disparate chains. From that regard, what should happen is gas should become much, much more abundant and cheaper. And so now transaction costs, like the noisy neighbor problem, kind of goes away, because if you have a super noisy neighbor here, well, you can just go spin up a new chain and run your app over here and not have to deal with that. So from some perspective, it's like everyone gets the benefit of just much cheaper gas, which is achieved via horizontal scalability. The second frame that I put on it is today, most apps are built and deployed for single chains. So if I'm deploying a lending protocol, that's on a particular chain. And if I want to go scale to some other chain, I have to go deploy there. And then I have to like facilitate my users going back and forth, or they have to figure out a bridging solution on their own. A lot of the tools that we're building for application developers are meant to make multi-chain deployment and management super, super easy, so that they don't have to like go through the mental gymnastics of, I built this for a single chain, what does it mean to deploy it multi-chain? They'll be able to just run through the same sort of like tools and practices they've done forever, but using tools that we'll provide. Suddenly that will just go multi-chain throughout the superchain, so they also get the benefit of horizontal scalability. Hopefully that all makes sense.
Huge. For sure. In regards to the cheaper gas aspect that you brought up, how much cheaper do you think it will be compared to today? And like by what percentage, what time frame?
Yeah, good question. I haven't looked in a week or two, but I think transactions on Base, for example, are somewhere in the cent to sub-cent, like slightly sub-cent range. And obviously this moves around as they continue to scale their gas targets and congestion happens, et cetera. We have a saying inside Optimism that actually we kind of hijacked a little bit from the Base teams. They're great at some of this stuff. Sub-second, sub-cent is something that we aspire to for all transactions. So when you put a transaction on chain, it should complete in less than a second, and it should always be sub-cent. I actually think as we really start to scale horizontally, we probably need to get to sub a tenth of a cent is probably like the minimum ballpark transactions need to be for us to really, really scale. And so we're kind of in the playing field already, maybe off by an order of magnitude. I think at sub cent, I don't think many users are actually like processing their sort of gas fees. But obviously there's still a lot of volatility there. The goal is to drive it down by another order of magnitude and reduce volatility to kind of stay there. I would say we're probably, the first version of interop is going to exist just to make moving assets cross-chain super seamless. One block, it's there. It will take us a little bit of time to move from solving that problem to like full horizontal scalability. So I would say that's probably more, 1 to 2 years out, where we can like feel very confident that we can always drive down gas costs. Obviously, some of this comes back to like L1DA as well and how blobs scale there.
Yeah, I think like the lower it gets on that sub-cent level, the more accessible it becomes, and like less concerned, if at all, people are when it comes to, transferring assets and things like that. It's super
Totally.
huge. So that makes a lot of sense. I also wanted to talk about Superchain ERC20. You brought it up already, and I talked about it a tiny bit in the intro, but essentially it facilitates secure token transfers between chains in the Superchain network, and it's through the native burning and minting, which, Sam, I'm sure you already know this, and you could probably explain it way better than I can. But it's also an implementation of the ERC 7802 token standard. Aside from the obvious of like making token transfers better, why do you think this is a better thing overall for product development within the Superchain and then the broader Ethereum ecosystem?
Yeah, today ERC20s basically exist on a single chain. There's one contract that manages which addresses own those tokens on a single chain. And to move those outside, there are ways that we move those tokens around in the Ethereum ecosystem. L2s is like a very common pattern. You deploy a contract on L1 or ERC20 on L1, and you can move those into L2s. But native L2s right now don't have ways. So a contract is split on base. It doesn't have a great way to move to Optimism without some sort of wrapper in there. We want ERC20s to be native across the Superchain and actually across all of Ethereum. And that's what ERC 7802 is really meant to be. It is just like a very minimal standard for enabling cross-chain token movements. For now, at least from our perspective, within chains in the Superchain, but eventually, hopefully, across all of Ethereum. Native assets have a ton of benefit over wrappers. It doesn't fragment liquidity. You don't have to have all these various append and prepend letters to all of your tickers everywhere as you move stuff around. And so we think that's just going to be a way better experience for users to understand what's going on, but as well as app developers to manage their tokens across a much larger swath of chains.
Mm-hmm. And what is the timeline for rolling out Superchain ERC20? Like, is it going to be done in segments or it's like all at once?
People are deploying them today. Actually, we've seen a large uptick, I think, in 2025 already of new Superchain ERC20s or ERC 7802 deployments on chains in the Superchain. Today, 7802 deployments function just like ERC20 deployments in the Superchain. When we enable interop and sort of flip that switch, then the magic is that those will immediately be interoperable across all of the Superchain, and we'll be able to move around natively versus just a standard ERC20 token, which will still have to move around via wrappers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In regards to wrappers, how do you think the Superchain ERC20 can improve efficiency compared to like the current bridging or wrapping approaches? I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but I guess when do you think we'll see like actual quantitative growth from this integration on that?
Yeah, good question. Well, so one, we are hard at work trying to convince everyone who's going to deploy a token on any Superchain chain today that they should use 7802 so they get the benefit of interop as soon as it ships. Our goal, and we're sort of still figuring out what our right targets are here, but is to have as many assets be interoperable on day one of shipping interop across the Superchain as possible. The more assets interoperable, just like the better the experience is going to be for everyone there. So, my hope is that there is real experiences that people can use on day one because we're already started deploying a lot of these. And anyway, people can see and feel that benefit right away. Mm-hmm. I do think longer term, the goal for chain abstraction generally, for example, is that applications, again, be them wallets, on-chain apps, whatever, actually can build this into their experiences. So folks don't have to think about, is it a native asset or not? Am I moving it from some other chain to here? Et cetera. And that will take time. How long? Don't exactly know. We'll be hosting a bunch of hackathons, seminars, stuff like that to hopefully help people start building that ahead of us actually launching this, probably in late Q2. But there'll always be some amount of, stuff that happened post-launch. And so anyway, we're doing our best to make it as interoperable as possible on day one.
Yeah, of course. What other ways do you see this improving token transfers and user accessibility or experiences across networks?
How else do we sort of see that happening?
I guess on the front of user and developer experience, I think a lot of the complaints I see online, not about the Superchain, but just in general, is user accessibility. So how would this kind of alleviate the pain points there?
As many of you know, the Ethereum ecosystem is vast, but it's still extremely fragmented. Are you tired of how complicated it is to move assets across different chains? I know personally, I am. So with that said, I want you to meet Across, the most reliable, fastest, and cheapest bridge in the Ethereum ecosystem. Across has over 15 billion bridged and 1.7 million users. It's making cross-chain transactions simpler for everyone. Its intent-based design means users will get lightning-fast transfers between Ethereum and L2s like Base, Arbitrum, and Optimism in seconds, not minutes. For users, it's seamless bridging. For developers, it's providing native cross-chain integration. Across Protocol is erasing boundaries and unifying Ethereum. Experience the future of unified crypto infrastructure at across.to. That's across.to. Catch you all there.
The vision that I think we're developing for chain abstraction, and I actually should just walk that back. Like, I think the generic vision for chain abstraction that is developing across Ethereum and maybe just across crypto broadly starts with something that is like, I don't know what chain this app is on. I don't know where my assets are. Like everything that I want to do just works. Oftentimes people point to the like, I don't know which cloud provider this server's in. I just show up on a website and everything sort of works, right?
Yeah.
That is like, we want to help enable those sorts of experiences. And so right now, like the point where we have leverage is within the Superchain, built around the OP stack. And so we're going to provide tooling for app developers, again, be them wallets, apps, whatever, to actually build and bring those experiences to users. And we're hopefully going to do it via shared standards. So again, like these things don't just work in the Superchain, they work across Ethereum. I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but like in general, we're going to try to start contributing to broader conversations around chain abstraction, and then showing how, at least in our little pocket of Ethereum where we can work, how we can work towards that vision.
You brought up integrating it across like the Ethereum ecosystem, and obviously the Superchain is very big. There's a bunch of chains within the Superchain, but I'm curious, do you see a future where the Superchain wants to integrate and work with chains that aren't necessarily within the Superchain?
Yeah, for sure. I think much in the same way that like Polygon Aglair talks about this, even outside of the EVM as well. I think the goal is to just give users the best experience possible. And building it, like, it's very rare that people only want to do something that exists on one chain in crypto. Typically, if like you're into crypto, you're into many different things across many different chains. I think it's kind of silly to think that folks are only going to have one chain that they ever want to interact on, keep everything on, et cetera. Again, no one like uses one social network, uses one website, uses one cloud provider. People are all sort of multi everything. And so, yeah, I mean, if I think about just like making the Superchain the best place for DeFi, the best place for builders, that as you sort of like run through what all that means, that necessarily means connecting into other vibrant ecosystems, whether they're on top of the EVM or even outside of it, like Solana. So for sure, we have to facilitate those connections and do our best to make it all as seamless and as abstractive as possible.
Yeah, no, I love that. So even outside of the EVM, goes beyond that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that will happen more so via folks like, Layer 0, Wormhole, Across, et cetera. But we can work with them to at least, from when they come into the Superchain or they come into an OP stack chain, to make that as seamless and as useful as possible in connecting those disparate ecosystems.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in regards to improving user and developer experiences, I also wanted to discuss flash blocks, which I described Superchain ERC20. So I'll let you explain flash blocks way better than I possibly could. But when it comes to that, I also want to know, like, what do you think is the biggest priority there when implementing it into the Superchain right now?
Yeah, so let me back up a second. We talked about sub-second, sub-cent. One of the simplest ways to rationalize how long a transaction takes is block times. It's not exactly block times, like other things happen, but you're kind of bounded, at least on the lower side, for the most part, by your block time. So just to like throw out a couple, Ethereum 12 seconds, most OP stack L2s today, 2 seconds, Arbitrum 250 milliseconds, Solana 400 milliseconds, Hyperliquid is now like 2 milliseconds. So the lower you get, the faster you can get a transaction included in a block. Typically, that means the faster you get a confirmation back as a user, and that's like how fast something happens in your app or in your wallet that you're trying to do. So that's just like one way to think about how like the UX, for users. Before jumping to flash blocks, we are on a path to just reduce block times in general as much as we can. We want to make them at least 1 second is kind of the default for new OP Stack L2s, and we're looking for ways to migrate existing L2s to that. And potentially we want to go sub-second in the future. Flash blocks is a way to sort of abstract some of block building at this protocol level and get users fast pre-confirmations so that the experience of interacting with an OP Stack L2 actually feels like your block time is closer to 250 milliseconds or maybe even less, maybe like 200 milliseconds. So you send in a transaction, you very quickly get a confirmation back, again, on the order of something like 200, 250 millisecond block times. And so it radically changes that experience. It'll be a order of magnitude faster for just most transactions on OP Stack L2s as these roll out. And so we think it's a massive UX upgrade for users. It's also been shown that most DeFi protocols, AMMs in particular, tend to function much more efficiently when block times are shorter or faster. This is one of the reasons Unichain is developing Flash blocks with Flash bots. And so, yeah, we're just really excited for all the benefits it's going to bring to users and builders on OP Stack L2s.
Okay, so there's Flash blocks and Flash bots.
Yeah,
I
so
thought I
Flash
was
bots,
misspelling one of the two. So that's good to know that I'm not crazy, because I was like going back and forth between this, especially when I was like thinking of questions for this. Okay, so there's Flash blocks, which can you explain the two separately again? Sorry.
Yeah. So Flash bots
Yes.
is a team that builds lots of
Here we go.
lots of infrastructure across L1, but also now starting to build a lot of infrastructure in the L2 world. One of their first forays into this world is a way to build blocks within the OP stack itself. And the specific feature, or one of the really cool features that comes with, there's many cool features that actually comes from, what they're building. But one of them is Flash blocks, which is this abstraction that sort of allows for what feels like, from a user's perspective, 250 millisecond block times, which is about an order of magnitude faster than OP stack block times today. Did that help?
Yes, that helps. So Flash bots has the Flash blocks. I am definitely not the person to do tongue twisters like that. Yeah.
Me too. I confuse it all the time. The Flash blocks repo is under the Flashbots organization in GitHub.
That's amazing. Definitely good alliteration on their part, but now we know. It's all clear now. Okay, so in regards to that, how have projects or DEXs, I know Uniswap has been circulating around in this, for example, benefited from this technology?
Yeah, so it is still in the process of coming to production. So Unichain talked a little bit about this in their white paper. They've been collaborating very closely with the Flashbots team to develop all this. It's first going to come to market on Unichain's experimental testnet, which I don't believe is actually public yet, but I expect will be probably sometime very soon. From there, it'll roll out to Unichain, and then sort of post rolling out to Unichain, we expect it to roll out to other chains in the Superchain and just OP Stack L2 generally. So I think that from a user perspective, when can you experience much faster block times on OP Stack L2s, or maybe Unichain specifically? For Unichain, it's probably, I don't put like dates around, their timings, but it will move from their experimental testnet to their mainnet. And then from there, it'll move to other chains. So in the next couple of weeks to months, we expect users to experience this, 10x faster experience on most chains in the Superchain.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask, how do you think this will improve performance on OP mainnet and other chains within the Superchain ecosystem? But I think, speed speaks for itself, essentially. But is there any other elements that maybe we're missing here that you think will really help accelerate these ecosystems once it comes to mainnet?
Yeah, I tend to think of it I think all of this comes down to two things. Like, what is the user experience? Is the user experience great? People all the time say Solana is just a better user experience. That should not be the case in a post Flash blocks world, at least from a latency perspective. I think we still have work to do to make sure transactions in the Superchain stay super cheap. We could just say transactions across L2s generally stay super cheap. But it should not be the case that any other ecosystem is a markedly better UX anymore, because we'll have, brought latency down so much. So users will get this way better experience. And then DeFi builders as well. Again, most DeFi protocols just seem to be way, way, way more efficient with faster block times. It gives them less time to diverge from prices in a centralized exchange, for example. And so the more we can drive that down, the more efficient DeFi protocols get. I'm sure there's a lot of just benefits from a builder's perspective there that I couldn't quite articulate. But that just makes their lives a lot easier. So I think those will be the two tangible ways it starts to improve things.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then I wanted to talk more about Ethereum's Pectra Upgrade, which is scheduled to start rolling out this year. Essentially, it's bringing improvements like account abstraction, reduced data storage, and faster smart contract execution to the broader ecosystem. In regards to Optimism and the Superchain, how are you preparing internally for this upgrade?
Yeah, excited to chat about Pectra. There's two things in Pectra that we're super excited about. One is just scaling blobs. I think right now the target's going to move from 3 to 6, although there's kind of ongoing discussion around that. But just really excited for more DA throughput and capacity on L1. We've been at congestion now for a while, and this is pre a lot of scaling plans that a lot of L2s have. So that'll be a big unlock for L2s. The second is 7702, which brings account abstractions to EOA. So we've had account abstraction for a while now. It's been via smart contract wallets. The vast majority of users, assets, wallets within the EVM today are still EOAs. So now we'll get a lot of the benefits of account abstraction for EOAs. So the way we're preparing for this is we want to enable that functionality on OPStack L2s as soon as it goes live on L1. So we will be looking to bring 7702 to everyone building on OPStack L2s as soon as we can post Pectra.
Yeah, I feel like account abstraction was a really big theme in 2024, especially within the Ethereum ecosystem. How do you think this will kind of evolve or change it this year?
Yeah, I think the challenge with it has been everyone that's wanted to leverage account abstraction has had to create new wallets. Because if you had a wallet with assets in it that was older than 2 years, EOAs couldn't take advantage of this. You had to move your assets somewhere else, create a new wallet. In some cases, this is like super easy. Coinbase's smart wallet, you can just create one on your phone, leverage passkeys. It feels great, but it's still a net new wallet. And so really what 7702 unlocks is just like the vast majority of addresses on chain, assets on chain, the way users interact with EVM chains is via EOA accounts. And so this just immediately enables account abstraction for that. If you go look at like smart contract wallet deploys, user ops, things like that, it was a little bit slow ramp, but I feel like Q4, we started to see a lot of these metrics get a lot steeper in terms of adoption. So I think what that tells us, kind of like you asked earlier about interop, like how soon will it get adopted? It took a little bit of time for these things to start really getting adopted throughout the ecosystem because developers have to incorporate them into their apps. I suspect 7702 will be a little bit faster because everyone understands the benefits of like how many more assets are now available for these cool experiences. But it will obviously take a little bit of time post-launch. But hopefully by like Q3, Q4, we're just seeing the way most folks get to experience interacting on chain is with various account abstraction benefits, be that paymasters, whatever.
You also said blobs increasing. What do you mean by increasing? Like, where is it now? Where do you think it'll increase to? And how does that play out for you guys?
Yeah, so today the target is 3 blobs per block. And the limit is 6. So if there's more than 3 blobs, you're paying more money for that. And if there's less than 3, you're paying less money. What if you go look at how many blobs are getting posted right now? It's basically pegged at 3. So that means like the market has found a good equilibrium there. What's great about that is like we found equilibrium and we're using up all the DA on L1. What's disconcerting about that is that there are a lot of L2s that have not yet launched. There are a lot of L2s that are quite nascent and are just really starting their scaling journey. Even for super large L2s like Base, like they are continuing to scale at sort of breakneck pace. And so it would be foolish to assume that we're not going to need that L2s are not going to need far, far, far more DA on L1 than is currently used today. So I think the latest proposal is to make the target go from 3 to 6 and the limit go from 6 to 9. I'm not positive that's the current latest thinking, but that I think directionally is sort of where we're at right now. So that would basically be a 2x in DA throughput on L1. Seems great. We'll have to kind of see how fast L2s continue to scale. My suspicion is we actually need far, far, far more DA than just that available on L1. Because what we don't want to happen is for this to get super expensive to drive transaction prices on L2s back up. And then either one, force L2s away from L1 for DA or force users to other blockchains to go get whatever they want done.
Yeah. I guess we've talked about the blobs, account abstraction. What other benefits do you think will come from this upgrade that we haven't already discussed? Is there something else that you think people might have overlooked that you're like, this is important, or just something that you want to talk about?
I think though, from like a L2 perspective, far and away the two biggest items in Pectra are scaling blobs and then 7702. And 7702 is going to have benefits not just for L2s, obviously on L1 as well. So I think like those are the really, really two big items. If I could push on anything, I would love for us to just continue pushing on blob targets and limits and just squeezing as much out of that as we can so that L2s are unblocked to keep scaling, not just, for the foreseeable future, but just as fast as they can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Cool. I want to remind people listening that if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as a reply, and we will do our best to answer them. I also want to talk to Sam more about developer ecosystems and opportunities there. And when it comes to developers with native interop, which we've discussed, in Superchain ERC20, how do you see the developer experience maybe changing within the OP stack now that these things are going to be coming on this year? Or they are on?
So alluded to this a little bit earlier. We can go a little deeper on it right now. I think the primary sort of like way you deploy an app in the Superchain is going to shift from I'm deploying this on a single chain, so I'm now deploying this multi-chain, so I can get the benefits and users can have the benefit of whatever app they're on. Whatever chain they're on, they can access my app. The first way we're doing this is with ERC 7802s. But in general, we think that like anyone who's deploying a smart contract is very likely going to want to deploy this multi-chain, so they get the advantages of horizontal scalability. So a lot of our DevX efforts are focused on really just providing tooling to make multi-chain deployment and management super easy as it is to deploy on a single chain and manage stuff there. We don't want developers to have to like rethink or relearn paradigms, primitives, et cetera, to suddenly exist and deploy apps in a multi-chain world. We want it to work just how it works today and feel like that. So it's super easy and straightforward for them. That's the primary way that I think things will sort of shift. In general, we have some tooling right now called Supersim, which is a way to sort of emulate interop, so to speak, and actually play around with message passing between chains, so you can actually get stuff done on various chains with using the same interfaces that will exist for interop when it goes live. I suspect there's lots of cool things to build there that we like can't really think of. I'm certainly not creative enough to think of, and so just look forward to like all the emergent, fun stuff that will come from cross-chain, composability that doesn't exist today. We're just going to try and provide as many tools for that as we can.
Yeah. I mean, given your title though, Sam, you are the head of product, so you probably talk to a lot of developers, right?
We talk to as many as we can.
Of course. So based on those conversations you've had with developers last year, even into, the first couple of days of 2025, what is the elements, tools that they want more of? And then on the other side, what is something that they really want less of, or maybe things that they want made easier? I think maybe easier we've talked about. So what do they want more of that the Superchain is hoping to capitalize on this year?
I think the primary way developers think about deploying applications within crypto is what sort of access do I get to users and assets via deploying in this particular place? Certainly there's this aspect of how good is this platform? Is it fast? Is it cheap? Or am I going to force a crappy UX on my users because it's slow and expensive? Once you get past that, I think the question becomes, what sort of distribution do I get here? Like, how big is this ecosystem? And interop is trying to be an answer to Ethereum and the EVM, I guess in particular, not scaling beyond single chains. To suddenly, we don't want developers that are deploying to any EVM chain to have to think about where are the most users and assets. Instead, they should just think about, I'm deploying on Ethereum and I get access to everyone here, versus having to have any mental overhead of do I have to, control C, control V these deployments across all these other chains? Do I have to give my users instructions on how to move stuff around, whatever? Because chains exist today, they don't scale infinitely, and there's only so much assets. This has to be one of the top things developers worry about. you can't deploy to an empty chain. Like it's obviously not going to work. And so the thing we're trying to do for developers is say, you don't have to worry about this anymore, because by deploying using these tools in the Superchain, you're going to deploy across many chains, which gives you access to just like a much, much greater set of users and assets than if you were deployed to any one chain. So it's not necessarily like a tool in particular that I think folks are asking for. We're just trying to say, all the restrictions that have been in place previously no longer exist because of this horizontal scalability feature that we're bringing. And now you can just focus much, much more on your experience versus like how you deploy this and get this in the hands of users.
Yeah, I think that's extremely valuable, because I feel like for a lot of developers, like the first step, even before building, is deciding where to build. And to your point, exactly, if they had the option to just be able to build and it's accessible across the Ethereum ecosystem, I think that would be kind of a easy no-brainer for those who want to be in the Ethereum or like an EVM compatible space, right?
Totally. Even once you decide to build on an EVM chain, you still have the question of like, okay, which chain or chains am I deploying to? That is like the order of operations, to your point of like what you think about first as a developer building. And so hopefully not just us, but everyone working on interop across Ethereum is just going to remove that thought from developers' heads and let them get on with the rest of their work.
Can they ever remove a chain? I don't know why they'd want to, but can they?
Well, so it's really interesting. The way like 7802 works, or the way that we're suggesting it work across the Superchain, is that anyone can sort of permissionally deploy these contracts across as many chains as they want. And the point is specifically that, like, we don't want to burden developers with having to keep track, like, oh, there's a new chain in the Superchain, I need to go deploy this over here. Instead, if we make that permissionless, it'll just happen as people have needs for it. So in some sense, like, the breadth of your app's reach is a little bit outside of your hands. It's much more just like a thing that exists on the network. So in that sense, it doesn't really make sense to like remove a chain, so to speak. I'm sure there are ways if someone wanted to block like a certain chain from interacting with their app, someone would come up with a creative solution for that. Hopefully though, developers, just like users, are just not even thinking about the set of chains that their app exists across. It's just, it lives in the Superchain. That's where all these users and assets are. Or even better yet, like it exists across Ethereum, across all these L2s and L1. That's where all the users and assets are that I want to interact with. And I don't have to manage that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Before we wrap things up, Sam, aside from the general 2025 roadmap and beyond these upgrades that we discussed, what else are you focused on right now in your role?
We are always growing our team. Yeah, definitely. I'd say first and foremost is like, we're always trying to grow our team, both the product team specifically and OP Labs generally. So hiring and trying to recruit talent is always top of mind. If there's any product managers out there, or just really anyone who's potentially interested in working at Optimism, please reach out. A big thing we think about a lot is Ethereum alignment, and just making sure that we represent that not just in our culture and values, but also in our product. So an example of this, again, we alluded to Pectra earlier. If a new feature ships on L1, we want to make that available on L2 as fast as possible, if not right away. We don't ever want developers to have any overhead of like, if this works on L1, it will always work on the Superchain with all the same expectations. So that's a big part of how we, like, in the product, work towards Ethereum alignment. But yeah, generally we're trying to always think about how we can be helpful to scaling Ethereum through both values and culture and other stuff. You know, a week or 10 days into 2025, I think building out this roadmap, hiring and ETH alignment is probably all we've thought about at this point. Yeah.
No, I'm sure you got your hands full with that. That's why I said, if anything else. And in regards to the broader Ethereum ecosystem, obviously we got the Pectra upgrade, but where else do you see the most opportunity for the network to improve and scale within this year?
Blobs. I'll kind of keep pounding.
It's the blobs. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it would be such a missed opportunity if L2s have to stop scaling, if we force users to go elsewhere because transactions are cheaper, or even if like L2s have to build technology to shift between Alt-DA back to L1 or anything like that. It's just unnecessary overhead and friction that we're putting in place that we're not managing well enough while we're trying to scale Ethereum. The goal is to scale Ethereum. We can't let barriers exist to that. And so the faster and safely, scaling blobs, I think is kind of the best way to continue to unlock L2 growth there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something that I always like to ask people who come on my podcast, and this will air on it as well. So selfishly, I'm asking, do you have any advice for developers or people listening in that want to build within the Superchain?
Maybe I won't scope it to Superchain. I'll just scope it to crypto broadly.
Advice in general.
Yeah. Try to do stuff on chain every day. Even apps that, seemingly do the same thing. If you're borrowing, lending, if you're swapping on a DEX, the way that feels and works and the way you interact with it across Solana, ETH1, L2s, maybe something like Hyperliquid, is just going to feel different, even though a lot of the underlying concepts are the same. And there's always a lot to learn there. I mean, one of the best things about these disparate ecosystems is that everyone's building apps that kind of do the same stuff, but get to exist in their own context. And so I think there's always little tips and tricks, like everyone's constantly getting better, learning from each other, and then creating the next thing. And so there's just so many good learning opportunities to go do stuff on chain and experience all these different apps and use cases. And it's actually overwhelming to keep up with sometimes. But I think that's just kind of the best way to experience like what the bleeding edge of crypto is and where it's moving forward the fastest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To wrap things up, I wanted to get to a few questions that we got sent in. One of them, I think it's a tough one, but developer or community, which is OP more interested in?
Good question. I think the answer is both. It's a cop-out answer. Mm-hmm. I think different people at Optimism are probably focused on different things.
Right.
So I think the Optimism Foundation probably spends a little more time thinking about community and governance and how to make sure that anyone and everyone can feel engaged and get involved in the collective. At OP Labs, we think a little more about builders. We're writing software and shipping code. And a lot of the ways we think of like who our customers are, they're obviously people that operate L2s, but it's also people building on those L2s. We want to give them, all these things we talked about, faster block time, super cheap transactions. I don't think we prioritize one over the other. I think just different people have different focus areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think both would be my answer too, if I had to answer that. Will Unichain verification network be brought into the broader Superchain like Flashblocks is?
Great question. So in general, this is not, necessarily up to us. This is up to chain operators if they want to emulate something like Unichain verification network. My sense is like Flashblocks, a lot of people are going to see a lot of benefits to it and are going to want to take bits and pieces from it and potentially deploy that for their own chain or their own apps even. All of that is open source software. I know the Uniswap team, the Unichain team has tweeted about this quite a bit. And so, yeah, we look forward to people continuing to build on the OP stack and then other folks taking advantage of that.
Yeah, amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing all your insights today on Optimism's 2025 product roadmap and more. And thank you to everyone for listening in. Looking forward to talking with the team again next quarter.
Thanks, Jacquelyn.
Thanks.